if I should have connected to Ethernet instead. Oh, it says published.
I can see too. I can check on my little phone and see if it's going.
Oh, yes, we are live.
We
Okay.
are?
Yes.
All right. We got in.
Yay! Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the FOX43 Book Club.
Yes, good morning. We're so glad to be here. I'm Gabrielle Mediak. I am in for Allie DeVicki as she cares for little TT, her baby, who, how long has it been? A couple months now she's been out?
Yeah, the end of October.
We miss her so
We
much.
do.
She is our resident reader, just like Kayleigh is here. And I'm just happy to be joining in all the fun, Kayleigh.
Yes, and I'm so happy you're here. It's so nice to have somebody to chat with.
Yes. And she's rocking her new FOX43 fit.
Yes, my first FOX43 merch. I'm very excited.
We'd love to see it.
Officially part of the team.
Yes, we love to see it. And man, what a day it has been. So this is my first day back from vacation.
Oh my goodness.
Which was awesome to be home for the holidays.
Yes.
So appreciative of that time. But man, I'm exhausted. The rain yesterday made the drive just like, ugh.
I didn't even
But we
think about
made
that.
it. We're here. You got to go home to Georgia for a little bit, right?
I did, yeah, earlier in the month, and then I was just hanging out with some friends and other family up here, like over Christmas, and it was great. It was awesome to see everybody.
Good. I love that for both of us.
Yes.
It's been good to have a little time away, but now we're back at it, and a really good day to read today because it's pretty foggy out there. The
Yep.
vibes are very meh.
Very stay in,
Yeah.
hang out.
Good day to escape in a book.
Yes.
And we're talking about our book from December, which hopefully you read too, which was out in Central PA. So we got to meet the authors. We went to Dickinson College and we got to chat with him and really see all of their cool displays there. They have so much going on. Such a supportive, inclusive university and school.
Yeah, they have all of like as many artifacts as they could find to preserve and all of these oral histories, and it was just really cool to like see all of this history that I honestly didn't even know was here.
Right, and I had no idea either. We got to really explore the campus, which
Yeah.
was nice. We even had a little lunch there
Yeah.
after. But I want to jump right into it, Kayleigh. Are you all set on your end over there?
Yes,
Great.
already.
So something that caught you by surprise right away and really captured your attention was right in the beginning of the book.
Yes. So immediately, like when you open the book, you know, you read little introduction and everything, and then right here, chapter 1, it starts with a poem. So I just wanted to read the poem because, like, the book itself was, you know, kind of emotional because there's all this history and everything. But this, like, really, I think, set the tone for the whole book, and I was just shocked when I read this poem. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm in for like a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
So here it is. There was a time I carved a heart on a tree in Pennsylvania, using the knife from our picnic basket. You, watching me in distress, whispered, "Don't put our names in the heart," so fearful they would come upon us, finding our crop of love too foreign to accept, and, like some Taliban sect, would raise up stones to put out our eyes. Your eyes, blue and frightened, implored me to leave the heart, empty. Having no armor for your fears, I relented, and returning the knife to its place in the basket, we both leaned against the marred tree, shoulders touching, the best we could do in a hostile world, and silently we ate our tuna on rye. So this really grabbed me because, like I said, like I hadn't realized that there was all of this history in central Pennsylvania, and like it just really, I think, captures the fear and hostility and everything that like the gay community did experience like back, I don't know, 50 years ago. And it was just shocking to me. Like now living in like 2023, I feel like you just don't really see that anymore. So to like realize that like these people, like they really went through all of this, there was these emotions were so real, like they really did feel like they had to hide. And that was like, I just think a really good poem to sort of put me in the headspace, like, okay, like you're going to read some hard stuff in this book. And that was just really interesting. It really like grabbed my emotions.
I can tell, you know, just by like looking at your eyes right now, you can see that it really hit you. It really got you. And I mean, even just hearing it from you too, I could feel it too. It's hard to think about a time when it was so not accepted.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we still have a long way to go, but things seem to be definitely on a better track than they were back then. And it's hard to imagine a time like that.
Yeah. A time when you couldn't even like walk down the street holding the hand of your partner. Like that's so sad.
I know. And the tree, because you could just picture, you know, sitting having your tuna and wanting to put your initials in it, and you can't, you're afraid to do it.
Yeah. You just have to pretend you're having just a little friendly picnic, and that's not what it was.
Yeah. So that got your attention right away. What do you think, if you could pinpoint, stuck with you most from the book?
I think definitely like just again like that realization that like, you know, these people went through so much, like every little piece of activism that they did, there was always like the threat of being arrested or
Right.
even like being disowned, kicked out of their community just because of who they loved. So that really stuck with me because like I've never experienced that sort of discrimination, and you don't really see it either anymore, like we were just saying. So to think about this happening only like 50 years ago is crazy. Like I just wasn't expecting that, I guess. Like it's one of those things that like I knew it, but I guess it hadn't processed. Like I never thought about it in that way until I was reading this book and these personal accounts of these people saying like, yeah, like my house was like firebombed, my store, like people threw dynamite through the windows, that just because it was like a gay supportive bookstore, that sort of thing. And that really stuck with me. And also just the fact that like in the very beginning of the book, they're talking about it's like oral accounts of people who grew up gay and knew that they were gay, but they didn't know how to express that. Like everybody's pretty much said like the words gay and lesbian were just not a thing. They weren't in your vocabulary. Yeah, so like they didn't know that was a thing. They didn't know how to express themselves. They thought that like they were the only one in the world who was feeling these feelings. They didn't even really know how to like navigate these feelings because there was no support network, no nothing. And again, it's just such a contrast to today. Like I can't even remember when I learned what gay was or anything like that because it's just there. It's just a thing, you know?
Right. And I mean, you think about how there was really at that point no internet, so
No
you didn't
internet.
have a place to find people to relate to.
Yeah.
And like you said, you could feel kind of like an outsider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Just ostracized a lot of people.
Yeah. So another thing that you mentioned to me was how so many gay and lesbian, it just, like you said, it just wasn't talked about. It was not out there.
Yeah, it was sort of like, oh, like, you know, Jimmy down the street is a little odd. He lives alone. And like that was it sort of thing. So these people really had to like figure out what was going on by themselves. A lot of people said like I didn't really realize what was going on until I met somebody else like me, and that was you know hard enough as it is because like, these people were sort of in hiding because the community was just not accepting of them. So it was really interesting to like learn about how like these networks developed, because the whole book is about how rural Pennsylvania developed like networks and connections, because you hear a lot of history about like urban areas and how people were able to form like gay neighborhoods and communities and that sort of thing, and were sort of like protected within their community because there were so many of them. But in central Pennsylvania and all these rural areas, there was no internet, like we were saying. So it's about like how like they literally set up like phone lines and like coded messages and like flyers and that sort of thing. There were like gay bars, but you kind of had to know somebody to know that it was a gay bar. And like, yeah, it was just a lot of just like rigmarole, I guess, just to find a community.
Gotcha. And I know a lot of this is talking about how the community was built, which is really amazing to see that so much of that happened here.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like a lot of just ingenious like ways, like, and just things that we wouldn't think of. Like we were talking about the phone lines. Like there was literally I forget exactly what it was called, but in Harrisburg, it was something like switchboard. And it was literally just a phone number that people would post. And it was sort of like, if you know what to look for, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. And these like people who were trying to get information and resources, they would call this switchboard. And then that's how they would find out about like gay events in the area and maybe like healthcare providers that were open to like gay patients and that sort of thing. And that's sort of how the community developed, but like it was much slower than urban areas and much more spread out. Like you would have people driving from, I don't know, Williamsport to Harrisburg, or like 2-3 hours just to find a community.
Wow. Which is so crazy to think about these days.
Yeah.
Because I feel like with the internet, it just changed everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like social media, at least even if you don't know anybody in person, you can at least scroll on social media and say like, oh, like this person is like me.
Right.
That's awesome.
Or find that support group on there. Okay, so I know a lot of things stood out to you in this book, but is there a specific person or event that really like tugged at your heartstrings?
Yes. So actually, we were talking about when I was in Georgia. When I was on my way home, I was reading this book on the plane and literally just sobbing in this airplane, which was hilarious because I was flying alone. Like the people next to me were probably like, girl, like, you know. But I was reading the part of the book about Governor Schaap, who was like the first governor who really like embraced the LGBTQ community. Pennsylvania was actually the first place to pass any sort of like anti-discrimination order, and that was because of him. He was the first governor to like openly sit down with any member of the LGBTQ community and like talk about political activism and that sort of thing. And so just like that like somebody being willing to like stick their neck out sort of on the line for like these people who were doing their best and trying to like fight for their rights and get equal acknowledgement and everything. It just made me really emotional that like, you know, there was finally somebody that they could turn to and be like, help, and he listened and he was there. And the part that also really stuck out to me was like the first meeting that he had with one of these activists. The person thought that he was just trying to hide it from the media because like they met in Norristown, like not Harrisburg, and there was no media there. It was just like the two of them in a closed room. And the guy who met with him was sort of like, okay, like this is fine. Like at least he's talking to me even, sort of thing. But then you turn the page and the guy's like, yeah, like at the end of the meeting, the governor was like, okay, let him in. And he opens the door and the whole like press just like pours into the room. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, not only was he willing to like listen, but he was also willing to like, you know, really put it out there, get the press involved and get everything. And I feel like that really helped get the ball rolling in Pennsylvania and especially like across the nation. So
and taking such a public stand.
Yeah,
that got me too. I could, you know, get like the little chills.
Yeah, it was like, and like especially too like that governor. He actually changed his name because he had like a Jewish sounding last name and he was worried about like discrimination against himself being governor. So like that too, even like he already felt like he might have had a, you know, sort of tenuous hold on like everybody, like the political like legislature, and he was still willing to, you know, just take that first step.
That's amazing. You know, like really kind of like one of the first allies that you think about. Very cool.
Yeah, so that definitely made me emotional.
Now, was there any history that you didn't know before reading the book? Because there's a lot that I didn't know that I learned even in our conversations.
Yeah, pretty much all of it. I had never thought about like, you know, again, like we hear about all of these urban areas and how like communities formed there, but I had just never thought about how that wouldn't necessarily translate to like a central, like rural area like central Pennsylvania. And we talked to the authors, Barry Loveland and Bill Burton, and they both sort of said like there was really nothing like in between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia for these people. So it was
That's
just
a stretch too.
Yeah, right? Like 4 or 5 hour stretch in between of just, you know, farmland and stuff. And again, like it was just really hard for them to find a community. So I just thought that was really interesting, like reading about the differences and how these people really like worked hard to find each other and, you know, make it easier to live in like central Pennsylvania area. And a lot of people did like move to urban areas to sort of get that community.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But for the people who either had families or like just didn't want to leave the area, like they didn't have a lot of options. So, you know, founding all of these networks and everything, it really improved their quality of life.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, even just being there, I was filming for Kayleigh while she was doing the interview, and you could just see the emotion in his face. Like he has literally lived it, Barry. That was right that we were talking to when I was there. I mean, it was just amazing to see someone that has done so much to move things forward.
Yeah. It was really interesting to me to like talk to Barry and then talk to Bill because Barry is from central Pennsylvania. He was here for the whole, like pretty much all of the history in this book, like Barry was here for. He was, you know, helping drive like the activism and all of that. But he was telling us about how he helped start a youth group because he realized that like there was this big gap. Like, you know, the gay bars were sort of like a refuge for the community, but, you know, like people who were too young, they couldn't go there, but they were still struggling with these issues. So he helped found a youth group and all of that stuff. So it was just really interesting to talk to him and then talk to Bill, who had grown up in urban areas, had lived in urban areas. He said himself that he sort of lived in like a bubble basically his whole entire life. And he just never knew also that like there was so much discrimination. He was like, he moved from a gay neighborhood in Arizona to a gay neighborhood in Boston to a gay neighborhood in Philadelphia. So he just never knew about any of this, never experienced any of it. And that's sort of how like Bill and Barry linked up, is because they both realized the need for like a history book like this, talking about something different. They were talking about how there's like a lot of accounts of like rural areas, but it's mostly just like coming out stories. It's not history.
Right.
So yeah, that was just really interesting to like see everything that went into it.
Absolutely. And just how important for the younger generation to have a support like that system, you know?
Definitely.
Very cool. Okay, so another one for you. Can you talk about the contrast between how LGBTQ plus people were treated 50, 60 years ago compared to now? I know we've touched on it, but it is just so incredibly different.
Yes, definitely. So I was saying about like how people's homes and like businesses were targeted. There were two accounts that really stuck out to me. One was a man who lived in Williamsport. He was gay and had realized it for a long time, but just, you know, sort of brushed under the rug. And finally, he came out, he moved into his parents' home, and he was still sort of like under the rug, but he was out. So he went to an event in support of like gay activism, and the media was there and they were trying to get people to talk and nobody would talk. So finally he stepped forward and gave like just, a little sentence or whatever. Didn't even like want to be credited with his name or anything like that. But that ran on the news a couple days later. It blows up.
Wow.
Everybody realizes like that this is this guy, and his house starts getting like attacked. Like people like threw bricks through the windows, and I forget what all else happened, but like multiple times he would fix his house up and it would get attacked again. And finally he literally had to leave his community that he had grown up in. This was his childhood home that his parents left him, and he had to move because it wasn't safe for him to live there. And like now I can't even imagine that happening, at least not here, not in central Pennsylvania, which it just goes to show you, like we were talking about earlier, the differences. And of course there is still discrimination in places, and even across central Pennsylvania, I mean, there's no statewide like anti-discrimination order. So like I think it was Bill said you can get married in Pennsylvania, you can get married to whoever you want, but the next day you could get fired at work for being gay.
Yes, he did say that.
Yeah.
And that's something that stuck with me too, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, it just seems like, I feel like people just assume that like there are these protections in place now, because I certainly did before reading this. Before Bill said that, I was just like, oh yeah, like it's 2023, like we've made leaps and bounds, and we have, except there's still a lot of work to be done. So yeah, that just like those accounts of like the attacks, and there was a woman in Lancaster who opened a gay bookstore because she was like, the community needs this. There's like no resources in this area. So opened that, and it got people threw like sticks of dynamite through her windows twice, and the second time it destroyed like half the store and she had to close.
Yeah, I do remember him mentioning that too, just for like being supportive.
Yeah.
It's like a lot.
Yeah, and it was a lot of stress on like these people themselves too. Like not only is their property being destroyed, but like I can't even imagine the mental strain that would have.
No.
Like, I'm not ready for that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So it really helped, like reading this, I think it really helped highlight to me like how much more accepting we are now, which is awesome, of course, but it also really helped highlight how much further we have to go.
Right. That's such a great point, and so true, both of them. Now, why is this book so important for others to read, or really to get the knowledge behind it?
So I think exactly for that reason, it really helps highlight like just how much further we have to go, because I feel like it almost feels like, again, I feel like I say this all the time, but it's one of those things that you don't know what you don't know until you know.
Right.
Like I had no idea, like I said, that all of this was going on, that there was all of this history just in Pennsylvania, because I sort of assumed like, oh yeah, like things happen in New York, things happen in California, but I'd never heard of like things happening in central Pennsylvania.
Right.
So I think it was really important to know like you can make a difference in your community. Things start small like this. There's always a way to like make a difference. And I also think it's really important for maybe people who are trying to change their community, change their stigma maybe, because like it's not necessarily a how-to guide on how to like create a community, but it kind of shows you like it can be done even in like rural areas, maybe more conservative areas. But it's possible for things to change and things to get better. And I think that's really like, that's my hopeful message that I got from the book, I think.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of puts people in the headspace that normally maybe aren't thinking that way.
Yeah.
Because even the beginning excerpt that you read, it puts you in the headspace. You're literally in that situation where you're afraid to put your initials in a heart, or to have lunch with somebody that is the same sex as you, and like people don't typically think that way because they're not going through it themselves. So it kind of lets you, put their shoes on for a second and take a walk in their shoes. Yeah,
definitely. I think it really shows like how this community had to struggle and really fight for every right that they've gotten. And, that sucks. A lot of these things are just human rights, in my opinion.
Exactly. Is there anything else that you wanted to add that maybe I didn't touch on?
I don't think so. I think that was really like the important things. I do just want to say though, we mentioned that we got to talk to Bill and Barry, and they had a lot of really, really wonderful insight. So if you're really interested in hearing more from the authors, we did do a Meet the Author piece. We have the full interviews with each of them on our website, FOX43.com. And I think that really just helps provide a lot more like insight, because like you can read the history in the book, but it's really I think, impactful to hear them talk about like their lived experiences and, you know, going through all of this.
Right. And that's also, they dive into it so much deeper than we can get into in one piece on air that has to be like 2 minutes long. You know? Like they dive into the issues and you can really learn a lot more through that.
Yeah, definitely. They go into the, like the history and everything.
Perfect. So before we go, did you want to touch on our January pick?
Yes, absolutely. So in January, we're going to be reading Living Quarters by Adrienne Sue. It's our first book of poetry, which I'm excited about.
Ooh.
Yeah, change it up a little bit. She is an author, and she is also a poet in residence professor at Dickinson College. So that'll be really fun. Nice little Central Pennsylvania tie again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really excited to just, you know, change it up. I feel like poetry kind of is like fresh and like fun. Like I think Mina was saying when she introduced the book about like, you know, it's just sort of like pick it up as you go, read whatever poems you want. And I feel like that just lends itself well to like January and the new year and new starts. So, and also Living Spaces, it sort of like explores like the concept of like house versus home, like what makes a home and that sort of thing, which again, I just think is cool for January and new beginnings.
Exactly. It is really the perfect time for it. It's a perfect time if you're watching to join the book club too. How about that?
Join
Check
the
out the
FOX43
books.
book club.
Yes. And Kayleigh does such a great job at picking these books, and they all have some kind of tie, like the author, to Central Pennsylvania, which is so cool. Highlights local, living local. We love it.
I never realized how many authors were around this area until we started doing this. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is awesome.
Perfect. Well, hey, I think that'll do it for us.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're going to do a Meet the Author coming up in January on this next book, right?
Fingers crossed.
All right. Yeah, we reached out, so we'll see what happens. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Hope you have a very happy new year, and we'll see you next time.
Happy New Year.
Bye.